say no to doing this. I'm 100% okay with doing this. I got nothing wrong with it. Just bear with me when it comes to pastor's notes and everything. We're talking about, so in his class, we've been talking about the tabernacle. So instead of just diving into one book and just continuously spending a year on it like we did the book of John, we're talking about just a simple subject now. And the subject of the tabernacle actually spans the entire Bible. But today we're talking about the brazen altar, the place of sacrifice. This is part of reminding ourselves of God's dwelling place among man when the tabernacle was created. So he's going through the symbolism of each individual section of the tabernacle, relating it to the eventual temple that Solomon builds, and then how it represents our walk with Christ as saved individuals. So our key text today is actually from the book of Exodus, chapter 27. And we'll be reading the first 8 verses of Exodus 27. Would anyone like to read it? Thanks for raising your hand, Patrick. I appreciate that.
All right. Exodus 27, 1 through 8. And you shall make the altar of acacia wood, 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. The altar shall be square, and its height shall be 3 cubits. You shall make its horns on its 4 corners. Its horns shall be of one piece with it, and you shall overlay it with bronze. You shall make its pails for removing its ashes, and its shovels, and its basins, and its forks, and its fire pans. You shall make all its utensils of bronze. You shall make for it a grating of network of bronze, and on the net you shall make 4 bronze rings at its 4 corners. You shall put it beneath, under the ledge of the altar, so that the net will reach halfway up the altar. You shall make poles for the altar, poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with bronze. Its poles shall be inserted into the rings, so that the poles shall be on the 2 sides of the altar when it is carried. You shall make it hollow with planks, as it was shown to you in the mount, so they shall make it.
All right. So, I'm reading pastor's notes here. So, one of the key things that we're going to talk about today is understanding as a group that before anyone could move deeper into God's presence, they had to stop at the altar. The brazen altar teaches that sin requires atonement, that forgiveness is costly, and that Christ is the ultimate and final sacrifice, and it also calls believers to live in daily surrender. So the week before, we talked about just the entrance of the tabernacle itself and what it symbolized. So the tabernacle, so God, when he gives instructions on how to build something, he's very specific. It's not just, oh, let's make it this, let's make it that. It has to be specific. We call back to when Noah built the ark. It was a very specific measurements of how long it was, how tall it was, and how wide it was. The same thing applies to the tabernacle. And one thing that I learned is the curtains that go around the tabernacle were so large that no one could just walk over or just seamlessly gets out of their tent one day, says, oh, I'm going to see what they're doing in the tabernacle, and just peeks in. They couldn't do that. They were specifically designed to where the only way to get in was one way. So that talks about becoming a Christian. You know, people can see what we're doing daily, all right? But if they want to know a true relationship with God, they can't just peek in and see what it's all about. You have to purposely walk through a specific gate, all right? This is not a faith that is a gigantic highway. We've all seen the imagery on Facebook and stuff like that. It's not this gigantic highway where everyone's walking the same direction. It's a narrow road, all right? And that applies to the entrance of the tabernacle. You know, you see it. There's multiple curtains. There were 2 red and 2 blue, but in the center was a purple one. And purple in the ancient world was a symbol of royalty because the purple color was hard to make. You know, we've got purple carpets, purple pews. I'm sure nowadays this probably wouldn't cost that much to get. You can go to, I was about to say Joann Fabrics, but that's not a thing anymore. Hobby Lobby or Michael's. Go there, and you can probably get purple fabric for pretty dirt cheap. What? It's like a couple bucks every square inches or something like that. I don't know. I don't mess with fabric. A couple of square yards. Okay.
You can tell you're not a crafter.
You're right. Okay. I can tell you everything you need to know about music, but not about crafting. So the only way you could walk through was through the purple curtain, and not anyone could just walk in. The same thing with the temple. There were specific days that you had to walk in. The great thing about the modern church is anyone can walk in. Now, Pastor did say, yes, everyone is allowed in this church. Everyone is allowed in this building. Just give them a heads up, okay? Because again, we've got people living here. It's like the same thing with y'all's house. If you've got kids, if you've got grandkids, if you've got relatives, you always say your house is open to them. My parents say that all the time. But my wife and I still like to give my parents a courtesy, like, hey, can we come over? And I always get the same response. You can come over. Like the same thing applies to the church here. Anyone can come in here. But with the tabernacle or the temple, it wasn't that easy. Couldn't just walk straight in and say, hey, what's going on today? What are we burning? All right? So it had to be a little bit different. So there was only one way to go in, and you can only go in at certain times. The same thing applied to the priests. So when it comes to walking into the tabernacle, you can't skip the altar. That's the reason it's right there. All right? When you walk into Christianity, you can't skip the ultimate sacrifice that was made for us. Patrick and I, if you haven't watched, we do a podcast every week, and we actually just got done with 1 John chapter 1. And when I say got through, we got through 4 verses before we had to cut the video short. A lot of people out there, they want to skip Jesus when it comes to being a Christian. They want to skip that part. And that's where we had talked about this sect of Christians post-resurrection called the Gnostics. They want to paint this different picture that fits their lifestyle and how they want to live. And they paint a picture of Jesus that's not real, like kind of this hidden figure. Like you really have to know him to get the full picture. It was like, well, no, that's not what it was. Like, there's nothing hidden in the Bible. It's all painted in black and white. So you can't skip the altar. If the gate teaches us how to enter, the altar teaches us what it costs. So one of the first things they had to do when they walked in was they had to make a sacrifice. Right? Does anyone know what the first sacrifice in the Bible was? Who made the first sacrifice? Like
it was, technically God.
Right.
He killed an animal so Adam and Eve could have clothes.
So Adam and Eve clothed themselves. What did they clothe themselves in?
Leaves.
Fig leaves. We've all seen the imagery. They got like leaves around their waist, leaves for a shirt. That's our way of clothing our sin and hiding it. But how big's a fig leaf? I don't know how big a fig leaf is. I'm assuming it's not big. Well, yes, a singular fig leaf. I imagine a fig leaf's not that big, okay? And you probably have to use a lot of it. So us as ourselves, when we want to cover our sins, when we want to cover our wrongdoings, we do a really poor job at it. So God had to make the first sacrifice, and it said he clothed them in animal skin. We don't know exactly what animal it was, but God still had to kill an animal in the garden, and that's how we know it was a perfect animal, because it came from Eden. So this is after he's cast them out, but he still had to make a sacrifice to give to them to clothe them of their sin.
Well, speaking of that as well, you have to think how disappointed God was at that time, because the only reason they were wearing the fig leaves was because they ate from the tree that he said you could not eat from, but yet he still had enough love for them to give them clothing, to give them what they needed. They understood what was going on at that point, but even in his disappointment, God still loves us and will give us what we need. And I think that's a hard thing for people to realize, because when the world falls apart, we want to blame God, but in these situations, their world literally fell apart.
Yeah.
And God loved them enough to still give them what they needed. Now, that didn't mean that they didn't get punished, but he still gives us what we need.
And that applies right here. So this first object inside the outer court, it wasn't a chair, it wasn't a table, it was not a place of rest. It was an altar of sacrifice. Before worship, before fellowship, before service, there was blood. This had to be done. You wanted to enter, you had to pay a price of some sorts. So think back to Cain and Abel. I was talking to Patrick about this last night at OMA, that, what did Abel give? in his sacrifice? Abel gave the best of his flock, right? So when Abel gave his sacrifice, he gave the best of his flock, probably a flawless animal of some sorts. Cain gave the bottom barrel of his crops. He didn't give the best of his crops. He gave what was left over. He went and harvested everything, and what was left over, he said, all right, here's my sacrifice. And that's the reason that God was pleased with Abel's sacrifice and not Cain's, because Abel sacrificed something that was good to him. All right? So when these people entered the tabernacle, they had to give up something that would have been of value to them, in this case, an animal. Animals were extremely valuable in the ancient world. Animals symboled money. If you had flocks, you had money. You had wealth because that was a trading thing, right? People use animals for. The ancient world, most people forget, it wasn't just kill an animal, get the meat, let the carcass rot. It was you kill the animal, the skin could have been used for clothing, it could have been used for anything for your house, the bones could have been used for weapons, they could have been used for tools, instruments. I teach my kids all the time that some of the first flutes in the world were made out of animal bone. All right, you got the meat is used for food. All right, so if you had a source of food that kept reproducing, you had value, you had wealth, and you could use that to trade. Someone says, hey, I've got this, can you sell this for a goat? Here's a goat, thank you for your, that's just common trade we've got today. Now we just use this paper that they say is worth money. So, if we go back to Exodus 27, the first two verses, you shall make an altar of acacia wood, 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. The altar shall be square, and its height shall be 3 cubits. You shall make its horns on 4 corners, and its horns shall be one piece with it, and you shall overlay it with bronze. Yeah. All right. So why do you think the altar was the first thing someone encountered when entering the gate?
To ensure that you are sincere, because you have to make that sacrifice.
To ensure you're sincere. Yeah.
It's the first step in the process of meeting God.
It's the first step in the process.
I mean, you can talk about all you want, but to have that relationship with Him, you have to have atonement for sin, and that's what this was. This is what this was representing. Now, of course, there were other types of offerings, and I know we're not going to talk about that, but typically speaking, at this time, and if you're ever interested, Leviticus details all the types of offerings, but they would bring the animal in, put their hand on it, on its head, and that was them acknowledging that there was some sin that needed forgiven, and then of course and then that's when they sprinkled the blood.
Yeah.
So that was that first step. So one, purifying yourself before going to the presence of God.
Yeah, and the good thing, and I'm sure if I probably have jumped over pastor's notes. We do this all the time in class. He'll have a point, and we'll jump to the end somehow, and we'll have to rope ourselves back and forth. Think about when you got saved for the first time. You had to make a sacrifice of stepping away from the world and being in the presence of God. Now, anyone can come before God these days. It's easy. You don't have to clean yourself up to come before God to be saved. He cleans you after you've been saved. But in this case, there had to be a blood sacrifice in order to just be in the presence of just other believers. You could be outside the tabernacle, but if you wanted to be in the place where the presence of God was seated, or just on the outskirts, because no one but the priest could go into the presence of the ark. But nowadays, just think about what you had to sacrifice. And everyone here is different. I grew up in the church. I can't tell you exactly when I was saved. I think that's a blessing in itself that I don't have to know. I've just always been here. But some people didn't grow up in the church, and you had to make some kind of sacrifice in order to be here with God. You know, you can come. Anyone can come into this church every week if they want, and just play the game. And pastors preached on it a million times, but if you truly want to be here for the right reasons, you have to give up something in your life. I don't know what that might be. It could be drinking, it could be smoking, it could be hanging out with certain people, it could be the language you use, the TV shows you watch. All right? It's whatever hinders your relationship with God, and it's different for everyone. That's why a lot of times, like today, people ask me, like, well, should I watch this? Should I do this? Be like, well, if it hinders your walk with God, yes. But I can't say no if I don't know if it hinders your walk with God. You should know what does. And so what hindered the Israelites' walk with God was just, at this point, as Pastor said in the previous weeks, he's trying to get the Egypt out of them. There's a reason that it took 40 years. 40 years, right? Yeah. Like, if you look on a map where Egypt is and where the Promised Land is, should have been, what, a 2-day journey?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it was easy.
If I'm not mistaken, they actually sent like spies out before them, and they came back and gave a report, and then they had just like
Yeah.
kept going.
They had to get the Egypt out of them. What's the first thing that happened when Moses goes up and gets the 10 Commandments? What does he come down and see?
His brother agreeing that they could build a golden calf.
Yeah, they're still doing what they did in Egypt.
There's a reason that these people didn't make it to the promised land.
Yeah. It took what? A generation?
Oh,
A couple
yeah.
generations.
And then even some for the next generation, because I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this, Joshua and Caleb, are they of the same generation as Moses? I don't think so, because Joshua's the next leader.
Mm.
He would have been alive while Moses was alive, and he takes over before Moses.
Yep.
So, I mean, they were the only two of their crew that actually got to go in as well, because they believed that they could do it.
Yeah. All right. Next question. What does that placement teach us about approaching God? And I don't have Pastor's little off-brand Lego tabernacle. If y'all haven't seen it, it's pretty cool. It's a build your own tabernacle, which is, we want one now. Collecting Bibles, and now we're collecting off-brand Legos. So what does it teach us? Like, that placement is specific. So what does it teach you about approaching God? You have to give up something, right? Like I said before, and I can jump through his points without even knowing it. You have to give up something, and in this case, they had to give up something that was of value to them.
I listened to a commentary about this where the pastor was talking about it's a belief where some people will say, oh, God was cruel, why would he make them kill animals and stuff to be able to atone for their sins? And the pastor was like, well, thinking back to that time, if they didn't do this at this point, Jesus' death would have made no sense at all. Because if they didn't have to see an animal, a herd, sheep, etc., die to atone for their sins, then the atonement that Jesus did for the finality of sins wouldn't have made sense to anybody. So they would have seen this guy crucified and been like, okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So this all set up the next steps as well.
And how does our culture tend to minimize or avoid the idea of sacrifice? I'll just use 2026 America at this point. How do we avoid sacrifice? We just do. What is it? Do what you want. That's what this nation's all about. Now again, like,
Forgiveness, it'll be okay.
yes. We live in a free country. Free country, okay? Worship who you want. Be who you want. Send your kids where you want. Which, in all fairness, I can't argue with that, okay? Because that gives me the freedom to stand here. It gives you the freedom to sit, whatever you're doing, all right? I'm on the internet right now saying what I want to say about a God that I worship, the God that I worship, and no one's going to stop me. No one should stop me, okay? But that freedom to choose and do what you want comes with the idea that when you want to worship the one true God, you have to make the sacrifice of, Patrick's going to go out and do what he wants to do. I could join him. I can go out and party, drink, do whatever I want. I'll go to church on Sunday and be like, hey, God, I'm sorry I did all that. Come Monday, go do it again. I can. I have the freedom to do that. And that's what our culture tells us we can do. Our culture also today tells us that you can paint Jesus however you want to paint him. Jesus was a hippie that said, love everybody. Jesus was a communist that said, we need to share in the wealth. Jesus was an anti-fascist because he told the leaders, you're doing it wrong. And then you sit there and you're just like, tell me you've never read the Bible without telling me you've never read the Bible. You glanced over a verse that somebody posted on Facebook. And I have to bite my tongue all the time when I get on Facebook. If I didn't run the church's Facebook and I didn't run the church's social media or what I do with Sissonville, I'd do what Patrick did. I'd give it all up. I would. Because I've seen how much better it can make a human being. People will misquote the Bible all the time. The devil did it to Jesus. And we ought to know how to refute it. But at the same time, we ought to know when to keep our mouths shut. Today's culture will quote Leviticus 19 when it comes to people being in a country illegally. But they'll ignore Leviticus 18 to teach you how to be a moral human being of who your partner is in life. One means something when it's relevant. The other is hateful. And that's what our culture does, is they'll cherry pick this, when in reality, if you cherry pick this, you've destroyed the meaning behind it. And that's what it means. And in our culture, we minimize sacrifice by saying, you can just give up a little bit. You don't have to give up the best. And I'm sure that's what was in Cain's heart when he said, I'll just give God what I got left. I'll give God my Sundays. That's all I got left on the week.
It's interesting that you're talking about that because right now we're also going through Lent, which is that time where people give up something for 40 days, and as soon as that 40 days is over, they're like, yes, I can have it once again. And that truly negates the whole purpose of what, in my opinion, Lent should be. But we like short gratification as well. Like 40 days, a month and some change.
Yeah.
So we feel good because we can give something for a month and some change, but that's not what the relationship is. It's about constantly giving yourself as that living sacrifice.
And the sad thing is Jesus warns us about publicly saying, look at me, look at me. What are you doing Lent for? If you want to participate in Lent, that's great. Because maybe after the end of that 40 days, maybe you realize, well, maybe I don't need that after all. I think Lent has good intentions, but then again, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. But I believe it does. If you, in your own personal time, say, I'm giving this up, and at the end of the 40 days, maybe I won't need it ever again. All right? I'm going to be honest, I didn't even realize Lent was starting until I saw a bunch of controversy over Ash Wednesday, and I'm just like, what are we doing? This is that social media thing. I wish I could get off it. It's evil. It's just dumb. I hate it. So our culture minimizes sacrifice by telling us you just give up what you want. God will take care of the rest. Like, well, no. We need to give up what God tells us to give up. And that's different from Patrick to me, from Courtney to me, from you to Pastor. You two have to give up something different each day in your life. Especially as a married couple, you've had to give up things to be there for each other. You and Pastor had to, especially when he got called into preaching. I'm sure you had to give up a lot. All right? I had to give up a lot going into teaching. All right? I've had to give up friendships going into teaching just because people are just farther away from me now. Starting this online ministry, we've had to give up things because we've invested more time into it. It's just drawn us closer to being deeper into our word. And our sacrifices are different because an ultimate sacrifice was made on our behalf, so that way it's more individual, it's more personal now. So now, in this case, they still have to make a sacrifice as a unit, as a nation, because that's what is required of them. So God's design reminds us that access to his graciousness, to him is gracious, but is never casual. Sin must be addressed before fellowship is restored. So the reality of sin and the cost of atonement. So, Bobby, can you find Leviticus 17:11? You all can turn there too. It doesn't just have to be him. So Leviticus 17:11.
The life of the creature is in the blood, and I have given it to you to make atonement for yourselves on the altar. It is the blood that makes atonement for one's life.
So in the Old Testament, life was represented in blood. The shedding of blood is symbolized by giving a life in the place of another. So the altar is declared something sobering. Sin is serious. Sin costs life. And God provides a substitute. Right? So Adam and Eve sinned. God provided a substitute to cover their nakedness. He had to make a sacrifice and cover them. He did that out of love. In the same way, when we sacrifice something to be in a relationship with God, we have to do it out of love. Right? Yes, giving up something's hard. Anything. Right? This diet my family's on. I have not been the most faithful with it in the past week and a half. I'll be honest. But when we started, it was tough. You know, Patrick's on his own journey with it too, but he had to give up something. It's tough. Like, I hate giving up something that I love. Food is delicious. Carbs are amazing. And I believe God created carbs for a reason, to be delicious. There's a reason it was manna from heaven. It was bread. All right? It would have been nicer if it was some bacon, egg, and cheese to go along with it, but it was bread. It was filling. But we have to give up certain things, and it's going to hurt. So giving up something that represented wealth hurt. All right? They were still among other nations going through the wilderness. Now, again, I'm not the greatest when it comes to knowing the inner workings of Leviticus to Deuteronomy or Exodus to Deuteronomy. I don't really know much about like their interactions other than some hostile interactions with other nations. I can imagine that maybe the people traded with other nations when they maybe encountered them before terrible things happened. But hey, I can't go trade today because I sacrificed my best goat to go into the tabernacle on Sabbath. There's a sacrifice, you know. I get paid this week. I'm sure other people might too. And what's the first thing you want to do? Like, you get money. She's like, man, I can finally get that. Patrick knows I've wanted a PlayStation 5 for the longest time now. And I just can't do it. That's a sacrifice. And I'm not trying to I'm not saying, look at Austin, he's sacrificing not getting a PlayStation 5, okay? But I got bills to pay. I hate being an adult. It's terrible. Taxes are horrible, all right? I've got PEIA insurance to pay for, and that rips a big chunk out of my paycheck, all right? But I have to make those sacrifices in order to be better. So when God provides us a substitute for our sin, it allows fellowship to be better experienced. You know, you can go into a place that feels awkward. You ever been into a place that you just felt awkward? Like, you're like, I don't know anybody here. Okay? I'm sure people, if you ever attended church for the first time in your life, you felt watched. All right? I can't say that, like, I can say that because, like, you know, I attended Cross Creek for a little bit. I attended Hurricane First. I've been out services at Oma. You may feel a little awkward. But when you first attended church, that weight of sin probably sat down on you because fellowship probably wasn't genuine. Okay? When we fellowship here together, we do it knowing that we're all one and the same under Christ. All right? So sin is serious. Sin costs life. Romans says for the wages of sin is death. All right? And that death was taken in the form of Jesus. He's the lamb that went to the altar before us so that we can go beyond the altar and be in the presence of God. So why do you think Scripture connects forgiveness with the shedding of blood? Yep.
It leads right up to Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, if it wasn't for this time frame and these instructions of what to do, how to do, because let me tell you what, it's detailed in Leviticus. If you ever get bored, you should do this without being bored too. But if you do, read the first couple chapters of Leviticus.
Don't read Leviticus while you're bored.
Yeah.
I mean, read the Bible if you're bored, but
But if
don't
you
read
know-
Leviticus while you're bored.
But if you want to know what sacrifice actually was, because this is just God telling Moses, "Hey, we need an altar for sacrifice." He's going to detail all of what to do, and like I said, they mentioned 5, 6, if you count another one, different types of offerings in Leviticus. So right now we're only talking about the burnt offering. This doesn't talk about the grain offering, the peace offering, the purification offering, the reparation offering, the drink offering. Like, I mean, there's a bunch of offerings. This is specifically just saying we need a place for burnt offerings to go.
Aren't you glad we don't have to go through all that anymore? I've already lost count of how many offerings. I'd lose count. I'd walk. It's like going to the DMV. Do you have your proof of identification? Do you have your proof of residency? Do you have a copy of the original Declaration of Independence? Do you have your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather's blood sample? That's what that feels like. And then if you don't have that, you can't, get your license plate renewed.
Well, you were talking, like, we're talking about how Jesus is the final sacrifice that we need for our sins. And and I know you've all heard Austin say we have a podcast. I read a lot.
Shameless plug.
But in 1 John, when he's writing this, he actually calls Jesus the propitiation, which is the atoning sacrifice. So I'm not going to go through how Jesus exemplifies all of these types of sacrifices that I just mentioned, but he is the atoning, the final, the one that covers it all. He was the burnt offering, which I know he was not burned alive, but the point of the burnt offering was the aroma. It was sweet to God. And they actually talk about that later on. It says in Ephesians that Jesus is that sweet aroma to God. And that was talking about his death. So we see all these things being laid out just so it leads up to Jesus. And again, the religious leaders needed something. They understood all of this. For some reason, they were able to understand all the laws and everything, but they couldn't understand the prophecy that was talking about the guy that was right in front of them. But that's a debate for a different time. But all of these things lead to Jesus. That's the important part. That's the end goal that we needed. We needed that atoning sacrifice so that we're not out here today still slaughtering sheep and throwing their blood on acacia wood that's covered in rocks.
Because the only person I would go to knowing that would probably have sheep would be Mike. I don't know, do you have sheep? Dang.
That'd be a good business for you.
That would be a good business. He's like, nah. Do you at least have goats? Oh, okay. So you got to mow your lawn, don't you?
I mean, that's just.
Wait, did you say you have chickens? The one thing Joseph hates? No wonder he hates them. He grew up with them. And the next question. How does modern culture redefine sin compared to Scripture? Yeah.
Where they glorify like homosexuality there.
Yep. I was about to lean into that. There are people out there that like to redefine history that we were not founded on Christian values. Okay, then where does the United States justice system morality come from? Murder is illegal. Okay, so there's one. Stealing's illegal. I mean, you just read the Ten Commandments. If we don't, in culture alone, honoring your mother and father has always been a good thing. Right? Listening to your parents. And now look at our nation today. When I grew up, someone coming from a household that was split was rare. And I'm not demonizing like certain situations, but I teach students all the time that have never met one parent or the other, that have never met both their parents. They live with grandma and grandpa. All right, and do you know that actually classifies them as homeless? If you do not live with a biological parent. And it was a culture shock because my parents have been married since 1989. And again, I'm not demonizing like certain situations, like it happens, but even if in that situation, you're to still honor your mother and father. Now, will they do dumb things or will they do things that make them look bad? Sure. You can honor them by learning from them. I'm not saying honoring them by going up to them, getting down on your knees and be like, oh, father and mother, thank thee for the... No, okay? And if Christopher did that, that'd be quite impressive. And then pastor would just be like, stop, child, you look like you're worshiping me, okay? Honoring them could be learning from their past and their mistakes, listening to their stories and knowing, hey, mom and dad made this mistake. They're telling me about this mistake so I don't have to. If when I went off to college, I didn't have to immediately go into a workforce because certain life situations hindered me from getting an education. I learned from my mom and dad. Therefore, I'm honoring their past, their sacrifices they've made, because as parents, I'm sure that you want your kid to live a better life than you ever did. You want them to be wealthier than you ever were. And that could mean monetary, knowledge, wisdom, whatever it may be. But you want them to be better than you ever were. That's honoring your parents. But when you take the life lessons that your parents, your grandparents, whoever, and you just throw that away and say, I'm going to live my life how I want. That's the biggest dishonor you could ever do to your parents. I call my parents every week. If something was wrong with my car, the first person I'm calling is Dad. Like, hey, Dad, is the engine supposed to smell like that? Like, hey, it's making a noise. What noise? I don't know. Does that ring a bell? And immediately he's like, sounds like a timing belt. I don't know how my description of sound can make him think of something in the engine. But we also redefine sin as, oh, this is okay. Jesus never said, I hate seeing that on Facebook. Because if you're a true believer, you know that Jesus was around since the beginning, because he is God. So therefore, if God said it, Jesus said it. And also, why would God call something an abomination at one point, but then suddenly just be like, no, it's fine now? Now, we're not under the sacrificial law anymore. We're not under, these different ritual laws. We're still under the moral law. Because the moral law was the mirror that was held up to humanity to say, you are imperfect. You cannot be perfect, and you never will be able to attain this. But God said, I have a way for it to be done for you. All you have to do is trust in me. It was that simple. And so we still have the moral law to show us we need Jesus. Right? People often like to read the story of the woman caught in adultery. They like to stop at the part where he says, no one's here to condemn you, neither do I condemn you. They stop right there. But what does Jesus say after that? Go forth and sin no more. So when Jesus finds you at your lowest point, he's not there to say, you messed up, I'm going straight to hell. No, he comes out of love, but then he says, you need to stop doing this and do it the way I want you to. So sin is redefined in our modern culture as we have levels to sin. Murder's bad. Murder's bad. Lying's like down here. Okay?
We even like to give descriptions like, oh, that was just a little white lie. Which, tries to justify that it's not as bad as like a lie.
Yeah.
And God calls sin sin. God can't be around sin. Doesn't matter if you consider it down here, doesn't matter if you consider it up here.
I saw this image long ago, and it was a bar graph that showed the different levels of sin. White lie all the way to killing somebody. We see it as levels. Hopefully we don't progress to that. But when you look at it from above, how God sees it, it's all one thing. So we can define a white lie as a white lie. As humans, as parents, you're willing to forgive that as long as somebody realizes what they did wrong. As society, if someone goes out and goes on a mass killing spree and they're arrested, and you've heard stories of killers finding Christ in jail, well, society will still say, well, they're still evil. Yes, as Christians, we'd be hesitant to like jump on the wagon of celebration, but what has a murderer done that I have not done in sin? For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That's what the Bible says. You can kill somebody. You can lie to your parents. You can have an immoral relationship with somebody outside of the sanctity of what God has stated. But it's still sin. Sin is sin. And society has basically said that they don't like that word. Some churches don't even like to use that word in their sermons. Oh, yeah. Those are pep talks, not churches.
Well, and you know, this is a hard conversation, but we are born into a sinful nature. So naturally, we have inherited sin. That's just for being born human. So, like, for example, when you have a kid, which I can't relate to, glad for you all that do, not me, not for me. But, you don't tell your 2-year-old to lie. But you ask them a question, they go, no. That's the inherited sin. Nobody has taught the child to lie at that age. And they don't really understand the consequences of right or wrong. But they still sin. That is a sin. So we inherently are going to sin. But then as we continue, we then have acquired sin. We learn the difference between right and wrong when we make our personal choices. We add to our sin load. And that's a hard conversation as well. Because you have to get that atonement for those sins. And just because you get the atonement doesn't mean that you're going to be sinless the rest of your life. And that's something John talks about as well. He was like, the goal is to not sin. However, if you do sin, this is what you need to do. So we have to understand that just because we also have forgiveness doesn't mean that we're going to live a perfect life and never sin again. But we have to know the next steps to get that forgiveness for those sins that we do commit once we are saved.
You know, I'm usually good at getting Pastor's lessons done quicker than he is, but you know, we've only gotten through 2 out of his 7 points. 8. Oh, it's a weekly reflection. My bad. Lord have mercy. I need to read these a little bit better. So we're not going to be able to finish this one. So Pastor, if you watch this later, point number 3 is where we need to start. All right. So now that Caleb's here, maybe he can answer. Caleb, how do you think the world has redefined what sin is versus what Scripture says it is?
The world doesn't believe there is such thing as sin. The world believes whatever you want to do, you can do. And if God says that you shouldn't do it, well, then he was wrong. The world is sin. So I don't think that's the definition.
No, we want to take the divinity out of God. So, yeah. All right. I didn't get through Pastor's